Hello, this is Malaya and welcome to All This Bliss. Today I have with me a longtime friend, Anaviel Ben Eliazer, and he is the author of a brand new book. The name of the book is At About the Time of the End, and I'm very excited about it and couldn't wait to do this interview. Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay. Now, this is a copy of the book, but I will be including at the end of the video a photo still so you can get a better look at it. Okay, now this book is, from what I have read and seen in the book, it seems to be a true labor of love.
Well, it is that, and first of all, as in all things, we must give praise and honor to the God of Israel, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God that returned us to the Holy Land by means of the Messiah, Ben Eliazer, and blessed us to be able to once again tap into the ancient knowledge and wisdom that He bestowed upon our forefathers. And being given access again to that information truly has inspired me over the last 37 years. And at a point, I decided that there was so much that I thought I had been blessed with that I wanted to share it with the world, with other people.
Okay.
And so this is the result.
All right. Well, let's start with the very first and obvious question of at about the time of the end. That sounds very familiar. For our viewers, can you let everyone know where did that title come from?
Very good question. And it comes from Sir Isaac Newton. In 1647, he made a very prophetic statement. He said, at about the time of the end of the world, a body of men will be raised up at Jerusalem, Israel, the holy promised land, and turn their attention to the scriptures and demand their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition. So when we look around at the state of the world today, when I was pondering what to entitle the book, I realized that we were living in these times, the time of the end of the world.
It does appear so.
Exactly. So with this new information that I was receiving concerning the Holy Scriptures, I realized that we at this point were in a position to fulfill what Sir Isaac Newton had prophesied, to literally interpret the Holy Scriptures. And that means we had to do it from the perspective of ebrain, or Hebrew. We had to go back into the ancient understanding of the language and extract the foundational meaning in order to return back unto the understanding that our fathers had, and then to go beyond them into the understanding that the God of Israel intended us to have. So this is what we did at this point. And in conjunction with that, there was a prophecy by Oscar Goldberg, and he said that the return of black people in America to the promised land would be the vanguard of the Messianic age. So that's why in the salutation I mentioned Ben Eliazer, and I gave him the honor and the title of the Messiah, because the fact that we are here in the Holy Land at this time indicates that the Messiah has to have come, because black people coming from America could only do that if they were led by a Messiah. So since Ben Eliazer is the spiritual leader, this gives him the title of HaMashiach, or the Messiah. And it was his bold initiative to leave from America that placed us in the position that we are now in, to be able to once again tap into the knowledge that was sealed at the time of Daniel, when the God of Israel told Daniel to seal up the book. Said, until the time of the end. And so Isaac Newton, being a Jew, would have been aware of this prophecy. And he would have been aware that in order for the book to become unsealed, someone would have to go back into the understanding from the Hebrew or Hebrew perspective in order to remove those seals. And this is what Ben Ami set in motion once we returned back into the Holy Land. He has always emphasized to us that the Hebraic language is our mother tongue, and that the final prophecies, the final messages will be delivered in the Holy Tongue. So this book is based on the Hebraic or Hebraic understanding of the scriptures.
Okay, now you've said a lot. And I've had about 10 different questions to pop up in my mind during that short span of time. Okay. But, so it goes without saying that you are a member of the African Hebrew Israelite community.
Exactly.
Okay. So, based on that, in your, the present book that you have here, can you tell me where this insatiable appetite and where all of the impetus came, where all of the passion came for you to write this particular book? Because there are many people that came to Israel, but there are not many people that have written such a book.
Well,
so where did all of the scholarly influence come from?
Okay. I was blessed to be one of a group of brothers who in the early years of the development of the community studied under the elder priest Anaviel Ben Eliazer and Prince Elihu, and in preparation for becoming priests for the community. And during the course of our studies, at a certain point, Ben Ami HaMashiach came and he personally instructed us in the law and the instructions of the Holy One of Israel. And it was when he took over the instructions and he began to teach us about the importance of the law and the life-giving essence that is contained when we understand the instructions contained therein in their entirety, that something began to open up in me. And that was back in initial classes were in 1977. We officially were ordained as priests in 1979. And in that year, I was blessed to be the first priest to be sent on assignment to represent the community as a priest. I was sent first to Chicago and then to Liberia. And it was a great honor. But that was the beginning of the journey that led to this. From that point, I was just, like you said, I had an insatiable appetite for study. And I was constantly studying and going into the scriptures. And every time I would go into the scriptures, it seemed like something new would open up.
Yes.
So at a point, I had started writing various small pieces and sharing them with different individuals. And at a point, my wife and others said, well, why don't you put it all together in a book?
Right.
And this is what we have.
Okay. All right. So would you say that this particular book is in alignment with everything that you've been taught and with all of the other teachings of the community? It's totally, or is this a personal account or view of?
Okay. The book is based on the teachings that I've received since being here. And I've taken the personal initiative to expand on them. Okay. Because we were taught that we were given a foundation. And from that we had to build on that foundation. Okay. And so this is why in the course of study, when you're seeking for knowledge in order to enhance your relationship with the God of Israel, it's not always an easy journey. It requires you to diligently apply yourself in studying and seeking out information. And so this is the result of years of studying. It was years before I wrote anything down. And I didn't do it until I was certain that what I was writing was in harmony with the teachings that we have received, simply on a more expansive.
Okay, so before we get into the actual body of the book, you did all this intense study. Now, was this in modern Hebrew? Was this ancient Hebrew? What exactly was it that you were studying?
Well, I started studying from modern Hebrew because that's what was available.
Yes.
And I was blessed that about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, Minister Eliyahu, came across this series of books by Jeff Brenner called the Ancient Hebrew Lexicon of the Bible. And in this collection of books, Mr. Brenner goes into the ancient Hebrew understanding of the scriptures.
Ancient Hebrew, okay.
Right, and he expressed that the difference between how the Hebrews or the ebrain viewed the world and the Greco-Roman way of viewing the world was like night and day. Because they viewed the world from the perspective of the five senses. Everything had to be related to something concrete. And everything was about motion and action. It was about doing. Whereas in the Greco-Roman way of looking at things, the Western mindset, there's a lot of abstraction. Okay? Everything that's expressed, like you might see the word compassion in English, okay, which comes from a Greek or a Latin word. But when you see it and you go back into the Hebrew of it, it has something to do with something very concrete. It's something that either happens to you or something that you actually do. It's not simply a quote-unquote feeling.
Okay, so how long did it take you to master the ancient Hebrew text? That must have been another couple of years just to do that.
Well, as I said, I received access to the books maybe about 4 years ago, and I only began to put things together within the last year or so, going in and researching and trying to be as concise and accurate as I could in what I was expressing, so that it wouldn't be that I was trying to put what I wanted to see there, but that I was really expressing what was actually there.
Okay. All right, so you did this intense study, and this was extracurricular activity, so to speak. And you came up with what I would call an excellent copy. Now, how did you go about, what criteria did you use to select the particular scriptures that you have put in here? Because basically, if I was to summarize the book, it would be a compilation of scriptures with the English language and then the ancient Hebrew literal translation.
Okay.
Okay, and what you've done is you've selected certain scriptures that you felt were paramount to put in the book, but what was the criteria that you used in that selection?
Okay, the scriptures themselves were selected based on the topics that I chose to deal with. Many of the topics in the book, there are 8 chapters in the book. Okay. The initial chapter was chapter I wrote last year because I felt I needed to express, after seeing this documentary by an English author named, I don't want to get his name wrong, but it'll come back to me. The name of the documentary is The Day the World Changed.
Is that it?
No.
Okay.
It's
Glad I didn't say it out loud. I was wrong.
Right, this right here.
Okay. So it was a documentary.
It was a documentary on the fact that James Burke
Okay.
from the BBC.
Okay.
And in this documentary, he expressed how we perceive the world, how we perceive the universe, is based on the content of our knowledge. So that when our knowledge base changes, our perception of the world changes. Okay? And he showed, this was a 10-part documentary, it was very, very interesting, very enlightening. How he showed how the Western civilization evolved and changed as their knowledge base expanded. Now, there are people who at that time believed that the world was flat, until someone came along and said, they looked at something and it made them wonder, well, why is that like that? And they investigated, and then they came to another conclusion, that the world is round. Okay? So then that became common knowledge. But even today, there are people who still hold to the fact or the belief that the world is flat.
There are people that believe that.
There are people that believe that.
Sure.
So they refuse to accept that as valid knowledge. So for them, the world is flat.
Okay.
So that's why I wrote the first chapter and called it The Beginning Knowledge. Because it's what you know. It's what you know. And as our knowledge base expands, then we have to decide whether we want to accept the new knowledge and fit it into, which will cause us to have to make adjustments in how we perceive things, or whether we want to hold fast to what we already know.
Okay. Now, in your book, you make a statement that you're going to use the terminology ebrain instead of the term Hebrew.
Right.
Okay. And can you just, for our viewers, explain why, or go a little bit into that?
The first thing is that the Bible is based or written concerning a certain people. Okay, and those people are connected directly back to the God of the creation. And that particular people had a name. It started with Adam, and then it went through Noah, then it went through his son, Shem, or Shem as some people know him. And then it went through his great-grandson, Eber. Okay? Now, from Eber, it went on down to Terah, and then to Abraham, then to Isaac, then to Jacob, and so on. Now, somewhere through all of the history, in the annals of the world, when you read about the development of these people, the only name you hear used nowadays relative to them is Jew or Jewish. But in the scriptures, these people are referred to as ebrain, or as people more commonly know it today as Hebrew. Now, the word Hebrew is not a direct transliteration from the original language. It's similar to what happened with the name of Jesus Christ. Okay? Where it became a J, and it was supposedly taken from the Greek, which was an I, which was originally taken from the Hebrew, which was a Yod, which is represented in the transliterations today as either an I or an E. So where did they get the H from? How did it become Hebrew? But by using this mistransliteration, it takes people away from the source of where the name actually came from. And it takes away from the power of the people who address themselves by this name. If you say that your name is Michael or Michelle,
Okay.
you say your name is Michelle, and I'm constantly calling you Shishel,
Okay.
then how would you respond to that? How would you respond to that? So if we're referring to ourselves by a name that's supposed to link us back to our God, then it has to be properly pronounced in order for him to properly respond. So,
Okay, so basically what you're saying is we're calling ourselves Hebrew Israelites, but that's the improper use of
exactly,
who we are supposed to be representing or who we are.
exactly.
Okay.
We're ebrain.
Okay, Ephraim.
We're ebrain. Because this connects us directly with our God and with the source of our power. We're ebrain Israelite. The Jewish people, for whatever reason, at one point they referred to themselves as ebrain. But then at the point they decided they didn't want to use that. They wanted to use the term Jews. They want for their collective people. But by doing that, that cuts off the rest of the tribes of Israel. Because Jude only refers to the tribe of Judah. And there were 12 tribes. But when you say Ephraim, you're talking about the children of Israel. All 12 tribes that were prophesied to return back into the Holy Land.
All right. Well, when you look on the internet today, there are so many different groups of Hebrews that are out there, and they all have their own separate philosophies and outlooks and culture, I guess you could call it. And so how does what you have proposed in your book as a more correct translation of the ebrain, how does what you see today translate into, or differ from the original ebrain? Do you feel like we're even close to coming to that particular understanding, that particular culture at all?
Well, when we view the proliferation of different groups who refer to themselves as Hebrews, there are countless groups. I was really surprised once I began to be on the internet more often and seeing all the different groups that are there and the different pronunciations they have for the holy language. And it was really an eye-opener. And when I stopped and I thought about it, I said, but everybody can't be correct.
I had a guest on my show, Rabbi Hoshua Mariel, and he is in the Guinness Book of Records as one of the first people to translate the ancient Hebrew text into Hebrew.
Right.
So he has his own philosophy and interpretation of how we're supposed to be living our lives as ebrain. And as I said, there are just so many interpretations that are out there. It just makes you wonder, how do we as a group, how do we mesh, how do we come together, where does it all lead to? In your book, it's very interesting that when you talk about the God of Israel, you refer to them as them, or he, she, them, because your premise is that the basic understanding, concept, idea of what God really is unity. It comes from the ancient Hebrew word for unity. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. And to dovetail in on what you were saying, I know Dr. Yehoshua is a very good friend. Mm-hmm. And what he did was, he didn't translate the Bible, he wrote the Bible in ancient Hebrew. He didn't actually translate it from the modern, in sense of changing what was there. He wrote it in the ancient Hebrew script. Okay? And it's a little bit different to...
You said he decoded the Bible?
He took the current Hebrew Bible, mm-hmm. and he wrote it in the ancient Hebrew script. Mm-hmm. Okay? Which, again, is going back to, because some of the letters and everything are different. Mm-hmm. So if you're reading it from that, then you're going to get another understanding. Now, when we go back and look at it, the key thing is getting back to the Genesis. And because the Genesis is where it all began. So then, the language that was then was much different than what we know of today. Mm-hmm. And we know that none of us has written a Bible. Everything that we read or everything that we quote from, somebody else wrote it. So, the only thing that we have but we use these things, these resources as guides, and they take us down this path. And in our sincere desire to understand what's here, in the book of Malachi it says that at the time of the end, once the God of Israel has returned us back into our land, and we have found pleasure again in his eyesight, said that he would give us the gift of discernment.
Okay, now in the community, there was a Bible that was compiled, or they actually published a Bible, right?
Well,
am I right?
That was the Bible that was done was redone based on our understanding of some of the scriptures, and it was expressed again from more of the modern Hebrew understanding, because at that point, the book that Mr. Brenner wrote, we didn't have access to that.
So the Bible that the community came up with, and they inserted different illustrations of the Afrocentric history.
Right.
And so it was basically presented from a modern Hebrew perspective, not the ancient Hebrew perspective.
Right. Most of it was we utilized the Hebrew that we knew of today. Mm-hmm. Okay? And even by doing that, we came up with vastly different translations than were in most of the other Bibles that you could read anywhere else. And it did, as you said, put things back on an Afrocentric foundation, because we took it back and pointed out that the Garden of Eden was in a specific location. Mm-hmm. And that location, when you look at it geographically on the map, lets us know that it said it was eastward in Eden, right?
Right.
So if this is east, the garden is here, it's in the east. That means that everything this side of it, okay, would have to be Eden, okay? Or everything around it would have to be Eden, because it's eastward in Eden. It's in Eden. It's in the eastward portion of it. So when you look on a map and you see the location based on what's in the scriptures, you're looking at Africa. So that's when we came up with the name of the African Edenic Bible. The African Edenic Bible, to link the Garden of Eden back with Africa, instead of it being associated, as most people think today, with the middle, quote-unquote, Middle East. I mean, where's the Middle East? The middle of what East? You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
So, again, we evolve. That's why I said knowledge, as more knowledge comes, then we are flexible enough to revise how we look at things. So as our knowledge of the language grows and increases, then our understanding of what's contained therein will also increase.
So you believe that from what you have studied and what you have contained in this book gives us at least a clearer understanding, if not an exact understanding of what it is that we're supposed to be undertaking. How would you, do you look at it as literal, or do you look at it as just a broad or clear interpretation?
Okay. I believe that based on what I've studied, what I've been taught over the years, that it's a broader perspective on some of the things that we've been taught. When I go back and point out some of the things that are contained within the scriptures, that when even at the level that we were at when we wrote the African Edenic Bible, that from the ancient Hebrew thought, they have a slightly different meaning. So then when we add that in, it doesn't really negate that. It simply gives us a broader picture of it. And this is true with everything that's basically written in the Bible after Genesis, because everything after Genesis is the falling away. So the laws that were given by Moses, they were given to a people who were trying to get back into a relationship with their God. So these were just foundational laws that took them gradually from the Egyptian lifestyle that they had into a lifestyle that was more acceptable to the God of Israel. But this was not the ultimate, this was not the final level that they were to achieve. And to get closer to the God that served that was the God of their fathers, that their fathers served, they had to continue to grow in their understanding. These were the initial instructions they were given, so that if they followed these instructions diligently and came to love them, to do them willingly from their heart, then they would begin to get the eternal idea that these laws represented, these instructions represented. And so in our returning back to on the path of ascension, we go through the same kind of cycle. And as we ascend, we're going to find ourselves leaving behind some of the things that we did at this level. Because what you did on this level, not necessarily what you're going to do on this level.
Well, that's, excuse me, that's a very interesting point. It reminds me of a quote, and I can't remember exactly the author of the quote, but it said, if one thing that we've learned from history is that we have not learned anything from history. So to go back a bit to what you were saying earlier about the ebrain and looking at things from their perspective, we can see their ancestors, not their ancestors, but their progeny in America. We can see how they have shaped and formed and from what they are seeing and tasting and hearing. And as you say, we have a knack for expressing ourselves from what we see and hear and feel. You know, you feeling me, you
Right.
see what I'm saying? And,
Right.
you know, not just from a linear perspective, but from a feeling perspective.
Right.
So we as a people, we have a tendency to do that. Now, how do we know, or do we know? If we were to go back in time now, let's use the analogy, let's go back 1,000 years, and you take a Samsung telephone, and you take it and you're showing it around,
Mhm.
they would probably look at you as if you were some kind of god, because based on their knowledge, you know, they would look at you as some kind of god.
Right.
Okay, when the actual truth is, based on the knowledge that we have today, that it's just a phone.
Right.
It does not make me a superior being, it just means that I have more knowledge.
Right.
So when we look at that in retrospect, how do we know today in modern society that it is incumbent on us to go back to those particular laws and statutes that they, or that perspective that they had back then? Why is it that is modern man supposed to put the blood on the doorpost? Are we supposed to continue to wear the sackcloth? What part do we bring with us, and what part do we leave out? Or we understand that if somebody were to come from across the galaxy and that they were to land a spaceship on the White House lawn now, they would probably every missile in the world would be aimed right at that spaceship.
Right.
You know, and they would look at us as being primitive.
Mhm.
But you know, again, my question is, so what's to say that we're supposed to go back instead of look at us as an eternal evolutionary process where we continue to ascend, and instead of looking back?
Okay. When we say going back, okay, it's the old path. And
Back to the beginning, you say back to the beginning.
we're going back to the beginning,
Okay.
okay? And we started here,
Mhm.
okay? So, and we end up here, okay?
Okay.
Now, like you said, it's about perspective. So, you know, you have a television, you have a video camera,
Mhm.
you know, they didn't have those things,
Right.
okay? And because we have these things, we think that we're advanced,
Mhm.
okay? But you go a couple hours journey from here to Egypt, and there are some edifices standing there that are called the pyramids, okay? They've been there for thousands
Mhm.
of years.
It's true.
And they can't really figure out how they built them. Modern engineers, they want to say that they did it by hand and they did. That doesn't pan out. And the conciseness of how they're built and how they're lined up astrologically, and it said, some people knew something. They had a knowledge and an intuition, a connection that is not present today. So when it says to seek ye the old path, it's because they had another way of looking at things.
Mhm.
They viewed things from another perspective. And when they viewed it from that perspective, it gave them access to another kind of knowledge. It's like we used the example again of what happened when the Western world began to develop. There was a man named Aristotle, a Greek. He was very, very famous. People I know, people all over the world have heard of Aristotle. And he was a very learned, very articulate man, and he expressed laws of physics and philosophy that lasted and were used as the foundation of science and philosophy for thousands of years, until somebody came along and said, wait a minute, what if we look at it like this? Okay? So, and going back up, we're looking at it in this perspective like this, but when we go back up, if we seek the way that they looked at it and try to understand it from their perspective, I'm sure we would see some things that would just, as the scriptures say, it said, eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard. There are things that we haven't seen, haven't had access to, because from this point, we fail. We fail. So we're going back up. We're ascending. So this is what it means when it says to seek the old path. To seek the old path. And a lot of that has to do with the moral issues that we see in the world today. Because the Western world places little value on morals and ethics. There's a separation, as they say, between church and state. But how is it, what does church represent to you that it can't also represent you in the state? How do you separate what's over here that can't have an impact over here? And this is what we're really going back to, where you asked me about the concept of God as unity. You can't, when you pull things apart, then you take God out of it. Because when it says in the Shema that the Lord our God is one, it's really saying the Lord our God is unity. The Lord our God is a wholeness. That
it almost seems as though it's so simple and so plain and so clear that you like the nose on your face. Because the concept of unity, when I look at religion, and I look at every major religion on the planet today, I'm looking at the same basic tenets of love your neighbor as you would love yourself. Don't steal, don't kill. And these are the things that we as human beings are supposed to be embracing. You know, we are supposed to be embracing the similarities rather than the differences.
Exactly.
You know, and when we begin to honor and respect that, then we'll find God.
Exactly.
So I think that in the migration of the ebrain, they probably took bits and parts of that perspective with them. And we find it all over the planet. An interesting thing that I had found was the Cherokee, the American Indians in America called the Cherokee tribe. They actually had some kind of text that was very similar to the Hebrew text. And I found that astonishing. And so a lot of this ancient text is somehow interrelated. And we find even all over Africa and all over America a lot of the same type of...
all across, like you said, all across Africa, all around the world. There are remnants of this same concept, these same concepts, this same understanding. So it lets us know again that these are universal principles.
Yes.
That we can all appreciate and we can all buy into and partake of. That's why it says in Isaiah that the nations would come up to learn of the ways of the God of Jacob, and so that through them the blessings will go out to the whole world. This is for everyone. Because truth, those who are seekers of truth can hear truth. Those who are truly seeking truth can hear truth. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter what language you grew up hearing. When you hear truth, it resonates in you, and you can relate to that. So I always point out the fact that in the scriptures it says that the God of Israel loves the stranger. It said he loves the stranger. It said we are to treat a stranger with respect. You know, simply when someone comes and a stranger is simply someone who has no knowledge of you, your God, or what you're about, but who may have a desire to learn. But even if he doesn't have a desire to learn, what he will learn from you is that you are a person who shows respect and honor to anyone who comes in your midst.
Okay. So before we go, because this conversation could go on forever. This is so interesting, and I just want to say, for anybody that is a student of the Bible, this is an excellent book. It's written in such a way that even the layman can get a very basic understanding of a lot of the more fundamental scriptures. Okay, it's not overpowering. It's not a huge book. Okay, so it's very well written and well worth the money. So, but now I have to get back to my last question. Now, as far as the priests in the community are concerned, what would you say is their main mission? The priests in the community.
I have a chapter in the book about the priesthood. And because the priests have a very important role in the Hebraic community, the priests were set aside. They were set aside, and they had no material wants. All their material needs were taken care of, because they were to focus on the more spiritual aspects of the relationship between the God of Israel and his people. They were the custodians of the instructions. They kept all of the holy items that the community had. So in that role, they were the teachers and the instructors in the things that would please the God of Israel. That's why during the Assyrian invasion, when the Syrians came in and they took away the 10 northern tribes, they had problems with people. The people that they left here had problems living in the land. And so what did they do? They went and to where they had exiled the ebrain, and they brought back a priest to instruct them in how to live in this land. So the role of the priest, it says in 2 Kings, that for a long season Israel has been without the God of truth, without a teaching priest, and without instruction. A God of truth, a teaching priest, and instruction. So
didn't the priests have the ultimate power in the community?
At a point, the priests did. When Israel first came back into the land, the sanctuary was at Shiloh, which is in the land of Ephraim. And that's where the people would come to counsel with the Holy One of Israel. They would come to the high priest, okay? And he would take their requests and present it before the Creator. Then the people said, we want a king, like the other nations. And it was at that point that things began to change. Even during the time of the judges, when the judge was merely a leader. He was someone who the Creator would find that he could impart a spirit into to lead the people in their struggles with their adversaries. So that even during that time, that leader would give respect and honor to the priesthood, because it was through them they would go before the people into battle in order to invoke the Spirit of the Creator on their behalf. So the priesthood, once it got away from its function, it also caused the people to get away from their function, because even under the kings, the priests were still the priests. And the king, there were things that the king had no influence in. He couldn't go into the Holy of Holies. there were certain things he had no access to that were only accessible to by the priest. So the priesthood were to be the objective representatives of the presence of the Holy Spirit of the God of Israel within the midst of the people. And they were to be, as I said, objective. They were not to be respecters of person, that when something was wrong, no matter who it was, they had to express, no, that's not correct. This is the way that this goes. And that spirit of a fervent desire to hold up the God of Israel is embodied in the promise that was given to Phineas when there was a plague just before the nation came into the land. There was a great plague that was brought on the people by their involvement with some Midianite women who were used as a ploy to cause them to defile themselves.
Right.
In opposition to what the God of Israel, the instruction that he had given. And as Moses and Aaron were trying to move through the people, trying to figure out how they were going to stop this plague, one of the princes of Israel took a Midianite woman and walked right by them into his tent. And this so incensed Phineas, who was the son of Eleazar, the priest, that he went in behind them and he ran them both through with a spear. And the God of Israel said, wow, look at that. Said he was so zealous to uphold my name that he would do this. Said he made an everlasting covenant with his family.
So he slew the prince.
He slew them
in order to uphold the commandments of the Most High.
Exactly.
Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead on and we're going to end. But I just want to say that this is an excellent book. Please let everybody know how they can purchase one.
I do have, for those of you who are in the land, I do have copies available, a limited number. But you can also go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com and type in the title of the book or my name, Anaviel Ben Eliazer, and it will take you to the site where you will be able to purchase the book online, and it'll be delivered within a short amount of time.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of that wonderful information,
Yes,
all
my
of the
pleasure.
enlightenment. And I have my copy, everybody, so you can hurry up and get yours before they're all done again. Okay? So, everybody, love you so much. Peace out.